was great, Isaac. Thank you very much. And those are all really good questions. And now I feel very intimidated about what I'm going to move into here because I'm going to bring it down a little bit. And but I have learned through my career, and I'm going to ask you first really quickly here. I'm a connector. I like telling stories. I like shining the light on really good ideas like Bitcoin. Because if you think about it, everybody in this room knows a lot about Bitcoin or is just learning or is eager to learn more. But let's just say it's still not a cocktail party thing. If you go to a party this next few weeks with your neighbors and you say, what have you been working on lately? What are you really interested in? I'm working on this Bitcoin company or this Bitcoin concept or this blockchain event, and they're all going to go, oh, nice, okay, let's go then. So I only have experienced that myself because I was in the energy industry for so long, and it was sort of the same thing. I got into the energy industry inadvertently. It was my first job out of school, and it just so happened I was in the part of the industry where it was just starting. And so when you started to tell people about the energy industry, they would say, how many people in the audience are aware, familiar, or have worked in the energy space, and not the parts that Isaac was talking about, but the ones where we actually create the power that runs the Bitcoin miners? Are there, okay, handful then, okay. But most people really, their interaction with energy is their utility bill, or if a power line comes down in their backyard or something like that. So you need, some capability to sometimes explain to people that energy isn't just hitting the switch on the wall, and you start to say, well, that's manufactured. And then they say, what do you mean it's manufactured? And then you kind of go into this next, rabbit hole, and you talk about how you manufacture electricity and all the different ways you can do it, and why people select a certain fuel source to make their generation, and on and on and on. And when you think about those things, and then you think about the Bitcoin world, and you think of how the two intersect, I think it's very relevant because in my experience, I'll give the 3-minute. I apologize because many of you have heard this before, but there was a time when energy was 100% regulated. There were no choices in who you bought your energy from. It was the local utility, or the wood burning fire, the wood burning heating system that you built in your house in the middle of nowhere. Those are kind of your choices. And so when you think of the fact that we had no choices of how we bought our energy, that kind of limited a lot of the, should I say, innovation in the space, because no one was, seeing the signals as to, if energy is cheaper here, what will that mean for why, if you build a cheaper energy source, people will come to it in theory. Now, you think of that when a manufacturing facility is going to open a new plant. Well, sure, they want cheap energy for their plant. Whatever they're making, whatever they're building, it's not just energy. I'm not going to be innocent about that. It might also be they want to be near a river. They want to be near a highway. They want to be near a railroad. Whatever it is, they need goods to come in and out of that building. But energy is a core concept that everyone's going to look at, right? And so when I first got into the industry, it was only utility choice. Where are you going to put your plant? Where are you going to put your business that needs energy? Of course, this is before Bitcoin mining. Yeah, I'm before Bitcoin mining, and that had a lot to do with what is the utility charging for my class of customer. Today, obviously, and it was a gradual process. Power was deregulated second. Natural gas was deregulated first because it was an easier concept to grasp. But it was still very complex, and there were all kinds of lessons that had to be learned and, should I say, hard-fast beliefs that the natural gas utilities had with the way the world should look. It should look the way it has always. This is the way we exist. And the concept of a utility selling natural gas or transporting natural gas across their infrastructure that they invested and built that wasn't their natural gas was just a crazy idea. So when you think that in the early 80s, when that was the world, you only moved utility-owned energy to all these different plants, to your houses, to your stores, and that someone was going to, or some companies, were going to change the world so much that the utilities were going to have to basically accept a new way of life, and a new way to coexist with people who would buy their own energy, control it, have the choice to do that, pay some sort of fee to those utilities and pipelines to move it to where they wanted, and hoping, obviously the motivation was that it was going to get to that location either more reliably or cheaper or both. So you call it beating the system or just looking at the matrix of the interconnections between the pipelines and the utilities in a new way. And so that was the first industry to deregulate. And then following that in the late 80s and early 90s, companies like Enron, which is a company that I think many of you knew. I first started in a company that basically pioneered the change in the natural gas industry, and we got really good at it. We started with the really big companies and moved our way down the pyramid, and we got so good at it that Enron wanted a piece of that action. And so they were largely a wholesale pipeline company, and they wanted to take our model of change and giving customers choice. They not only wanted to take that and make it bigger, but they also wanted to apply the same logic of choice and deregulation to the power industry. Bigger use. The more people pay more money for power than they do for natural gas. So when that all happened, there were lots of changes and things that occurred and more opportunities that came about as a result. And so what started to happen is when you had deregulation, a lot of the states that adopted that more readily, like Ohio was one of the first in both, more industries moved here and supported the concept of lower energy for various reasons, for various industries. Obviously those seeds that were planted and have been here for a while have now been tremendously important for Bitcoin miners to consider Ohio. Not only for if they're touching a utility or not, but the infrastructure and concept of choice is very important. So I was fascinated, and this is, so we'll just say for many years, 30 plus years, I had to take this whole concept of deregulation and choice to all levels of energy buyers throughout North America. So, global procurement and commodities people at Campbell's Soup and Nestle and Weyerhaeuser and Georgia Pacific and a whole bunch of them, because at the time it was foreign to them. They thought what the concept was, well, how do you do that? Is it legal? Wait, I need to check with my attorney, and all of these were just, wait, sounds good, but how do I know that this is going to work? So as part of it, and you see it now kind of paralleling in the Bitcoin space, the regulation from state and the federal level starts to change, starts to bubble, like, well, what if the state of Ohio did this or Pennsylvania did this? Would that make the ground more fertile for changes in energy? Well, what are you seeing today? You're starting to see the same thing. The states, never mind the whole world. We know the whole China exit thing, and now we're in the US. But if you just focus on North America for a minute and look at all the different states, all the different blockchain consoles, and how they're trying to impact the rules in their state to make it more attractive or less attractive for commercializing Bitcoin mining or the use of Bitcoin and the whole concept of that. it's so parallel to the energy industry because it started with this piecemeal kind of dereg, and then eventually like, okay, once 17 states do this or 5 do this, wait, this is crazy. Shouldn't we have some sort of federal legislation that talks about some uniform code for all of these deregs to speak kind of the same thing? So I love the energy industry. I actually got a little bored of it, but I'll admit I needed something new to make me excited about it again. And probably the thing that's made me excited about it again and why I'm really focusing back in the space again is Bitcoin. Because truly, here you have a new user, the miners, who are probably the most industrious and creative group of figuring out how to use power, how to use it in a very intense yet very intelligent way, and how they're, obviously they're using it for, everyone has a reason why they want Bitcoin, whether they're storing value, whether they want to spend it, whether they want to save it, whether they just philosophically want to blow up fiat currencies, whatever it is. They all have different levels of all of that, right? But the point is, you need energy to create those blocks. And so what I have found is I was very excited to learn about it. Nowhere near the level of Isaac's knowledge or any of the software engineers that I've met who are in it every day. I go to them as resources, but I know that more stories have to be told at all those big energy companies and all those regulators of the mining industry in a way that they will, if you would, put down their defenses and realize that, wait, this could be better for everybody. If we have a more uniform way of regulating energy as it touches Bitcoin and then other industries, then this will be a space that can be more productive for everyone. So I have been, in my kind of way, I like to go into a room of strangers and tell them that I'm like into Bitcoin now and here's why, and then yeah, I'll plug Synota because it's really relevant, because it is disrupting a very big part of what's been going on in the energy industry, and that clearly intersects with the Bitcoin space because it's that technology that we're using to provide that solution. So I just look at it as another way to connect a whole nother level of people and group of people that fortunately, some of them who haven't retired are still there and are willing to listen to me. And I want to apply that same concept not only to the people in the energy companies, but I think, if you need to point and fire certain people as use cases and telling stories about how change is good and it can be good. I'm not saying all change is good, but most change can be used in a positive way, that you need to educate the people who are going to influence the rules, accommodate what we're trying to do in a positive way, and make that path easier for, the whole concept of mining and the systems that Isaac talked about, so we can apply it throughout the blockchain to so many different industries that will benefit from it. So I'm just trying to do that, and I just wanted to share a little bit with you, and then I'm going to shut up, about how just my plain vanilla background in energy and understanding of how to structure deals in that industry, how it all evolved, how it works. A lot of those same lessons can be learned and applied in the space that we're in here today with the Bitcoin mining and the whole ecosystem, in order to raise it up and how those benefits can be shared with so many different industries and parts of our economy. So that's really all I wanted to share with you today, is my excitement about telling those stories. And I love that all of you have helped me come up the curve, because I know that, I don't know who I was sitting next to. Maybe it was you, Logan, maybe it was you, Shannon, but somebody came to one of our meetups, and I wasn't trying to be mean, and I hope I wasn't, but someone was saying about they were doing something and they were using Ethereum or one of the other blockchains, And I said, well, why are you using that? I mean, Bitcoin's better, and it's pretty obvious why it is. And I told them the reason why it was. And I think somebody said, you go get them, Rob. Yeah, you got it. So I was proud. I'm learning a little bit here. So thank you very much for coming. Thanks for listening to me go on. I'm just really excited about what we do here and want to just continue to spread the word. So yeah, I'll take, Lisa. Sure.
Just out of curiosity, because I think there are options in Ohio, other states too, but like in Ohio, like could you walk through, like I'm a miner, I would like to have a facility in Ohio. So like what is my energy journey? Like I need infrastructure, I need a supplier, I need a generator, like how does it all?
So I think I'll thank you. I'll try and do the best I can there. So first of all, in Ohio, I think most people don't realize that, okay, there's three options basically of ways you can connect with your energy source. And if I'm missing one, someone correct me, but I'll think about it later. But there's off-grid. So literally you just have your own energy through the hot geothermal in the hole in the ground next to your facility in the middle of the forest. Okay, that could work, right? It's a different type of technology, but it works. That's officially, we'll call that an off-grid example, right? It's not touching anyone else's assets but your own. That's what I consider off-grid. So then when you get into the regulated aspect of how you buy your energy in Ohio, there's two types of distribution entities. There are co-ops, and then there's three kind of co-ops, munis, and utilities, investor-owned utilities. So the reason I state that is because the rules are different for each of those. So the investor-owned utilities, everyone talks about the PUCO, and the PUCO regulates everything. Well, the PUCO really doesn't regulate everything. The PUCO regulates the investor-owned utilities. The co-ops have a different layer of regulation that's mostly self-imposed. And the munis are in a similar way. Now, I'm not saying there aren't some rules of the road for how you hang up wires and all of these things for safety purposes and other things, but for the purpose of the service level, the cost of the energy, et cetera, those are the examples you have. So when it comes to that, the reason I say that is because utilities in Ohio, by design, have tariffs where they have to accept other people's power and run it through their system. So you have to, a co-op does not have those rules. They are their own. You either buy it directly from them at that traditional regulated manner, or you don't. And they don't have the commission saying you have to give someone the right to move power through your system. The utilities do. So then first you have to decide where you're going to buy your power from one of those three choices, your own, off-grid, utility or muni. But then you have to figure out go, sure.
But wouldn't, like, from my point of view, the obvious answer is the cheapest one. Which one is the cheapest one?
Well, the utility, but what I just described to you were the distributors of the power, okay? They're not going to typically actually, you can buy a bundled rate from them, but typically the cheapest is going to be an unbundled product. So you can buy power from AEP's bundled rate where they're selling power that they bought from someone else because they don't generate their own power now in Ohio, where they bought power from someone else and then moved it to your location. Or you can do the next step, and that is find a power supplier through either directly to that supplier or through someone who knows the business like me or other people, and connect you with those suppliers. And then you determine how much power you're going to need. And then the most important thing is when you contract with that supplier, is going to be to them, A, is your credit good? And what does that look like? And then B, your load shape. So, which begs the obvious question is, Bitcoin miners have the most flexible loads in the grid. So to a supplier, Bitcoin mining is a very attractive load shape to sell to because you're going to be very responsive when prices are high, you're not going to mine. And so Bitcoin mining has opened up a whole new group of supplier interest, and then, you know, they're going to, every supplier, when they structure a deal, is going to take all the components that it takes to serve that customer, and there's probably like 25 of them, put them into a spreadsheet and pop out a price. Okay, it's not that easy, but that's basically what they do. And they look at all aspects of how the load is used, the time of use, when it's used, the peaks, the lows, because they're looking at it from a cost of service that they have to do. And it's largely the supplier, not the utility or the distributor, that is going to tell you what that price is. Because the price to distribute that energy to your location is the same, and that's known. The price of the energy is the wild card. That's the thing that depends on who you are, being credit-wise, how big your load is, and the way you use your load. So, yeah.
So the reason I interrupted you was because you said like, hey, the three options you have is co-op, municipalities, and
Well, I actually put the munis and the co-ops kind of the same because they're kind of self-regulated.
utilities, right? The third one was
Yeah.
But like, and off-grid, sorry, yeah. So
Yeah.
co-op, off-grid, and utilities. But like from a point of view of a miner, like that doesn't matter to me. Whoever is selling it the cheapest matters to me, right?
Right. So what you need to do is find the individual or group that's going to go to the suppliers. You start usually with the suppliers and say, what is this load going to cost to deliver over here? And they're going to probably say, well, we can't deliver through the co-ops, so they're immediately eliminated. We're not an off-grid alternative, so that generally leaves you the utility in the middle. If you're buying anything from the co-ops or the munis, it's a bundle. If you're digging your own hole, in my example, that's your choice. So the utilities have different rates, delivery rates, that they can't discriminate on depending on how much load or the type of customer you are to their distribution system. So that's easily calculable. All their rates are public, and you can calculate that. But generally, your supplier will do that for you if you don't know how, and they'll kind of help you through that. Does that help? So, I mean, the supplier is the key.
Sure.
And the suppliers are all different shapes and sizes. It's a whole spectrum of someone who has, you know, 4 windmills or, you know, some solar generation, or, you know, like I said, coal generated, which is very, very few anymore because it's just not competitive, natural gas, and then obviously now you're going to big scale and you're talking about nukes and things like that, or even mini nukes. But the key is, in Ohio now, the legislature changed a few years back. The utilities used to own all their own generation assets, and that was part of their rate, built into their rate structure. None of them now own their own generation assets. They can own it, they're allowed to, but they're not allowed to pass through any of the costs of their generation assets. So some of them have tried to say, okay, we're going to try this for a while, and we're going to take the cost of running our generation, we're going to take all the risk from that. And then pretty soon they realized they didn't really want to do that. So once that happened, they sold those generation assets to independent power producers, who professionally, not that the utilities weren't professional, but there are now thousands of generation assets in Ohio run by independent people who sell those into the grid or to customers. And so, does that help?
Yeah.
More than you maybe want.
No.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
So you said that the utility will ask to see like the Bitcoin miners' load requirements or load profile. Will they share their load usage with the Bitcoin miner too? Right? Because if I was a Bitcoin miner, wouldn't I want to know if I'm going to have to turn off all the time because of spikes, or that's going to
Well, that depends on the level of service you're requesting from your supplier. So if you say, I want to buy power 24/7, uninterrupted, but then you have to agree to, well, I can send you power 24/7 uninterrupted, 365 days a year. But you have to know that if you're looking for a fixed price, they're going to build in all of the crazy, because they have to back to back that. Whatever they're selling it to for you, they have to know that they have to go into the market and buy that load shape in that price. So they have to build in what it will cost to serve you every single day of the year for every hour of the day. And so usually when you try and bundle that into a fixed price, because they're still doing a lot of guessing, because it's a lot of statistic, it's going to be a very mushroom, big fixed price, because they're mitigating their risk. They don't want to be wrong, so they're going to load stuff in there to make sure they're covering it. So many Bitcoin miners have learned that, and in other industries, they're not the only one that buy variable prices, and will say they'll buy the market, okay? So that in order to protect from what you just laid out there, a fixed bundled price, they'll say, I want a variable price because I know over time, if I buy that fixed price at 5.5 cents over a year's time, I probably could have bought a variable for 4 cents or 4.5. And yeah, sure, maybe for a month or two it might have been more expensive, but for 6 months it might have been less expensive.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Brain fart. Would you recommend that as a home miner to have a variable? Because I can get a lower rate at a variable.
Yeah, but you're,
Yeah.
well,
Your fridge has to run.
yes, but are you buying it from a third-party supplier or from the utility?
I go to apples or whatever and check.
Okay, so that's a third-party supplier.
Okay.
So, you know what I mean, as opposed to doing nothing and just taking the default rate.
Yeah, they'll take me to the default.
So you're not taking the default rate,
No.
which means then, yes, I mean, either way you're speculating. I used to tell, and the reason I say that is because at your level of kind of like mass market variable, the suppliers, it may end up, but they're going to put a sharp premium on top of those variable prices anyways, because I've seen them do it. I know what they do, and assuming, I mean, I don't know, what's, if you don't want to tell me, but I mean, get to a certain level of usage where it's relevant to them to do a custom pricing for you, and you're still buying it through apples to apples, which if you are, it's not.
And I was like, oh, that might actually be better. Because I've always been fearful of variable rates.
Yeah,
That's nice to hear.
and it's funny because when I used to go to all like Campbell's Soup and them and say, well, do you want a fixed or a variable price? And I would tell them all the reasons why you do this or that. And many of them were managing to a budget. So like whatever it was that they were using it for, they would just, yeah.
One thing is you might be able to get a time of use, so you might get a cheaper night rate than day rate, and then mine all night like crazy. So you might be able to get.
But I doubt that any of the suppliers in Ohio are for that kind of load going to give him that kind of
They
rate.
know but they might not know he has it, right? They might
But
not.
even if they have it, they can't monitor it
Yeah.
because the utility is monitoring it, and they won't get the meter information from the utility that would enable them to give them that rate. I mean, it depends on what tariff you're on, right? I mean, I'd be happy to help you with that.
I'm thankful, no.
Yeah. I mean, it's what I used to do.
Yeah. I changed my supplier every 3 months, it feels. So, I mean, it's
Yeah. But all I was getting at with that is that some people used to say that, well, if you don't fix your price, then you're speculating. Well, if you do fix your price, you're speculating. So, I mean, it goes both ways, just depends on your perspective, right? And so, yeah, I'll give you an example. So going to budget, that was the old school way of many companies saying, look, we just don't, our energy budget, what we paid the utilities last year was $10 million. As long as it's $10 million or less, we're golden. We just don't want it to be 11. Then we say, okay, well, if we can lock in a $10 million budget for you, is that good? Oh my gosh, it is, you know? And so a lot of them do that. Now, one company, two companies in particular that generally don't, but one for sure, Koch Industries, Koch, they absolutely take the market 100% of the time. Because as they gobbled up companies that used to do it the old-fashioned way, they immediately told them, you're changing the way you do it. And I know that from firsthand experience. They bought Georgia Pacific. Georgia Pacific used to have a bundle of variable and fixed pricing until Coke came in and told them you can't do any more fixed prices once they expire.
But do they make other changes? Sorry.
Oh,
Do they
sure,
make other
sure. Oh,
changes
sure.
to that? Do they also like try to manage their energy usage during spikes and everything?
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, what I didn't say, which is a whole nother, if you're first of all, natural gas is deregulated in pretty much all the states, largely where people live, okay? Power is only deregulated in about a dozen states, 10 kind of wide open, 2 sort of. And so you really don't have your choices in like most of the states for power. But what you're going to then brings up a whole nother level. Many Bitcoin miners have 2 sources of revenue. Their mining revenue, and then their revenue for when they're not mining and they're getting paid to be off the grid, which is called demand response, or basically as the price gets high or the system needs their capacity, they say, hey, get off the system, please, and we'll pay you to get off. And the reason they do that, well, why are they so generous? Because that's instead of them going and buying that next level of more expensive power into the market, or if they still own generation assets, bringing on that next incrementally more expensive generation asset onto their system. So they gladly will pay you so they don't have to do the other because that's cheaper, right, in the long run. So, but you have to realize that the cost, the benefit to a miner for the DR market can be changed a lot depending on the bigger pool of grid that they're in. The values of what you get paid in certain markets is extremely high, and yet that can change over time depending on how many more assets come in and how the new players into that market, or it can be very low, or it can be non-existent. So you have to be aware of what your choices are when you're looking at that type of portfolio, if you would, for your revenue. So that help? Cool. Yes, Mr. Austin.
Rob, in your career, what's the craziest story you've got?
Oh gosh. One of my most fun stories, and it's not even an Enron story, believe it or not, although those are countless. This was just a fun one. Honda was one of my big customers when they were one of the very first organizations to come on to buy all their natural gas from a third party, and we were there. I was their account guy, and we did everything for them, and I had access to the top people at Honda who did everything at Honda. And one time during in Honda at that time for sure, and I think even today, view that any second that their plant is not operating is a car that isn't being sold, because they have an infinite view of any car they make is going to get sold. And so there was a period of time in the 80s, so they opened up operation there. I think the first thing started in 83, but in 85, there was a really bad winter, and I think it was like in the winter of 86 or 7 or 8, I don't remember, but and the Columbia Gas transmission, which is the pipeline that feeds Columbia Gas of Ohio here locally, took some of their gas. And as a result of it, they didn't take it, but they redistributed the gas to other parts of the system. And so Honda had to close their plant for a few days, or maybe a week. I don't remember what it was. And we discovered that for them. And they said, where'd this gas go? And first they looked at us like, did you mess something up on how to get it here? No, we actually had it all in there, come to you. And then they said, oh, well, then it was something that Columbia did. Yes, it is. And we have the proof of it, and here it is. They used your gas while you needed it. And it was not a human needs interruption. They did it more for operations. Human needs means they're allowed to take your gas. They have to tell you if it's needed for residents and hospitals and things like that. But if they're taking it just to make it more efficient to run their system, they're not supposed to do that, okay? And so they did, though. And I remember going with the plant manager, a bunch of attorneys, and we were the backup, we were the support, we had the numbers and the information, and we flew on their private jet to Charleston, West Virginia, where Columbia Gas Transmission's headquarters is. And the guy who was in charge of the Honda plant, whose name I'll leave out, but why not? His first name was Scott, and he was an attorney, and when we got off the plane, this doesn't usually happen, by the way. Customers don't get on their private plane and fly to the utility ownership. Got off the plane, and I don't know if anyone's seen Charleston, West Virginia before, but Columbia is a pretty big employer there. They have this massive corporate headquarters for Charleston, West Virginia. We got off the plane, and their CEO and everyone's, hey, how you doing? Thanks for coming. You know, they know what's coming, but and we're kind of chatting a little bit, but Scott is just walking to the room where we're gonna talk, and we eventually get to the big boardroom, put some food out and all, and then they said, well, what can we do for you? You know, and Scott was at the time probably 50, kind of a husky guy, fair skin, so he could turn red really easily. And he just started pounding the table as loud as he could. And he just like this deliberate pounding. He said, you stole my gas. And he just did that, and they were like, could not believe it. But anyways, that was pretty much the meeting. We then stayed for a few more minutes. They said, well, fix it. And I mean, we weren't there for more than 15, 20 minutes. We left, went back on the plane, and they were like shitting like crazy because they didn't know what was going to come next. But that was a really kind of fun event.
So they wrote Honda a check, or?
They fixed it.
I mean, they got the plant going.
Yeah.
Because of lost production.
Yeah, I don't remember the total settlement, but yeah. But those are the kinds of things, because you have to realize that was still in the early days when if you didn't watch them, in theory, the pipelines and utilities kind of did what they thought was okay because no one was really watching. But Honda kind of noticed, but we were their advocate because we knew everything. We had the whole paper trail of what happened. And that just, they weren't used to people putting it back at them because they had it their own way forever.
What year was that?
That was in the 80s, mid 80s.
What does that even mean they wouldn't notice? Like, if your plant is shut down for a week, how are you not noticing?
Oh, well, you have to remember, even if the gas doesn't show up for a couple of hours, then they say, why? And then if it's a little longer than that, then it's like, okay, when is it coming back on? And I'm sure TECO, Columbia Gas Transmission, eventually said, oh, it's going to be back on tomorrow. You know what I mean? Or tonight or whatever. So the interruption may have been, I can't remember now if it was a couple days but once they knew it, then they said, okay, well, what happened? And then went into this whole investigation. There wasn't anything they could do about it at the time. They couldn't physically go out and turn it on themselves. They could just and I'm sure at the time, Columbia Gas Transmission was making up every excuse in the book other than the truth as to what happened. And you had to believe them. It was sort of like, okay, well, whatever, if that's what it is and whatever, but it didn't turn out to be that way. It was more of a convenience thing than a reality, like a human needs thing. So, yeah.
Wait a minute, are the energy providers, are they willing to and interested in providing power to Bitcoin miners, or do they not really have a choice? Is it just like it's an electrical load? Is it an electrical load?
Oh, so if it's a regulated utility and you're paying your bills and you're paying from their tariff, from the rate that everyone pays in your load shape rate class, then yeah, they cannot discriminate as long as you're paying your bill. So, but as soon as you go away from the utility and create your own source and distribution, then you have more people that they can say no, right? Only the utility has to take you as a customer. Yeah.
Where does Synota come into play here? Are they disrupting are they disrupting like financial payments infrastructure? Are they like AAP? Like where?
So Synota helps to mitigate the risk of energy service providers who want to de-risk their customers. So if a generator of power wants to sell power to, a data center or, and it's maybe Google's or Meta's or a chemical company or whatever, as long as they have good credit, they're going to sell it to them at whatever price they agree to. A Bitcoin miner, though, is an example of a customer group that typically doesn't have a high level of credit, capability with most in the eyes of most suppliers, and therefore they will, because they use their energy, they use energy for 45 days before they even get a bill to have to pay for it. So they say, in order to de-risk that today, in today's world, they say, well, pay for 2 bills up front or put collateral up front for two days, which could be, 75 to 100 days worth of energy, right? So what we do is enable those, if the counterparties, the supplier and the miner, agree that we'll use Synota's software in their daily payment rails, then they're getting paid daily. We're de-risking that problem. And therefore, instead of 75 to 100 days, they might say, okay, 15 or 20 or 25 days. And then all of that working capital goes back to the miner to buy more machines or hire more people or whatever it is, right? Does that help?
So they kind of lower the credit risk?
Well, they don't change the credit. Yes, they do really lower the credit risk, but in a way that there's less exposure for the amount of outstanding receipts. They're not really changing the balance sheet of the miner, but they're changing the exposure that they have, because they wouldn't get paid on a daily basis. They don't get paid until you use your energy December 1st. You don't pay for it. You don't even get the invoice until the middle of January, and then you pay for it later.
They're not extending as much credit to the miner.
Right.
Fronting as much money.
Right.
But it's not just miners, right? 'Cause
Oh yeah. Oh no.
we pay more for electricity just because we get to pay it like way after we use it.
Yeah, every residential customer, every Taco Bell, every doctor's office, if you're buying from the utility or whatever, they're extending you credit. And all of that is built into the cost of energy. So that's why the more and more people use, Synota eventually, then that's going to contribute to bringing down the cost of energy. Because right now, that's a non-energy asset cost of supplying you energy, because they're all taking out loans to, in order to provide you the energy, because they know you're not going to pay it anytime soon.
Is the ideal scenario you're streaming sats as you're using the energy?
You mean, how does it work for a Bitcoin miner when they pay?
Yeah.
Yeah, so every day that they mine, then an invoice is created at the end of the day or at some period in the day, where the two parties had already agreed to the price times volume. So, and once that's created, then immediately, instantaneously, the Bitcoin that they mine with gets converted to US dollars in this example locally, and then pays that energy supplier those dollars show up in their bank. And so the other benefit is that Bitcoin miner didn't have to maybe cash out or convert Bitcoin weeks ahead of time in anticipation of a bill coming up, pay more for the conversion and have their dollars not doing anything. Instead, what we let them do is to get a lower rate of conversion and a more instantaneous event, so that they're mining and paying at the same time every day. I mean, not saying exactly the same minute, but you know what I mean. And so there's a lot of benefits there. And then there's even benefits to their back room. So there's less complications with accounting because every day you have there's no accounts receivables or payables. It all happens at the same time.
You mentioned lightning nodes, so like you just set up a lightning node for the
Right.
both sides of the
Right, exactly.
channel. Okay.
And we do it all for them. So they just tell us what's going on, and our software in our back room does all of that for them to make it. Because believe me, if I went to the energy companies and told them they had to now be an expert in lightning nodes, they'd say, later.
Cool.
Those have got to be some beefy channels. Just gotta say. All right. Sorry.
Well, you guys have been, I'm going to stick around, so I don't want to hold everybody up here, but thank you very much for listening to me go on and on and on.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah.